All right, guys, I am coming to you live or on tape from literally the only quiet place in my house. I have been banned to the garage. Fortunately for you guys, we don't have too many more of these videos left. Maybe like 3 more after this one. So let's start knocking it out. Today, we are going to be talking about the African resistance to the European scramble for Africa. I'm going to get into it, but the Europeans have come in. They have divided up Africa. Don't think that the Africans are just going to go quietly into the night, because they're not. They're not going to necessarily long-term accept European dominance over Africa. So let's get started. 1880 to 1900, we see essentially the scramble for Africa. All the European leaders initially met in Berlin. They have a big table with a big map of Africa, and they're playing a game of Risk. I'll take this, I'll take that, I'll take this. They didn't consult any Africans. They're just saying, oh, I like what that area looks like, I'll take it. What? I bet you that's got good resources, I'll take that too. Okay? So we're going to see that they're all playing their part. Now, that being said, the British, the French, they have the largest colonial empires in Africa, which only makes sense because they're two of the 3 most powerful entities in Europe. We're going to see that Germany and Portugal, they have some territory in East Africa. Spain, Italy, they have a small amount of territory. And of course, last time we talked about Belgium, how they're having area in the Congo. So everybody's getting their own little piece of the pie, okay? Now, of course, the Europeans, they easily do this, all right? It's not really a big, long drawn-out fight to acquire parts of Africa. And it's not because the Africans are that bad of fighters. It's really because the Europeans have all the technological advantages. Now, of course, when I say technological advances, your mind should immediately go to the boomsticks. All right? The Europeans have breech-loading rifles. So think of it as like modern rifles where they're not muzzle loaders that you have to like put the musket ball in the tube every single time with a ramrod. No, it's like a modern day weapon that you're probably used to. Okay? And they have machine guns. So you have a repeating rifle and then you have machine guns. This eliminates arguably the most effective tactic that has always been used in Africa, the frontal charge. Sure, you get all those Africans lined up, and they're yelling, and they're screaming, and they're saying, we're going to take you down, Europeans, and then they're running into machine gun fire. You see how that works for you. It's not, okay? That's why the Europeans are going to have such an advantage here. Now keep in mind, it's not just guns. It's a lot of the modern day industrial output and advances that the Europeans have. They have steamships, they have railroads, which allows them to go further and further into the interior. It allows them to settle areas. It allows them to put administration over areas. More importantly, it allows them to move the military quickly. You don't need 1 million Europeans in Africa when you have a train that can carry a smaller amount rapidly from A to B to C to D to E to F. Okay? So you have trains, you have steamships, okay? You have telegraph stations. You have the ability to communicate rapidly over long distances. So whether it's politically ruling areas, whether it's sending military orders, you're able to do that now from a centralized command. Another one, I think I kind of mentioned this before, we're going to see that the Europeans will discover a drug called quinine. And quinine helped fight off malaria. Well, that was always one of the big things that killed Europeans in tropical areas, was the mosquito, bringing in malaria. Well, now you have something that can fight malaria. So really, there's nothing stopping the Europeans at this point, and they continue to just push more and more and more into the interior. Now keep in mind, the Africans are not just going to lay down. They're not just going to be like, okay, guess the Europeans are in charge. I mean, make no mistake, the Europeans will win. They will put the Africans under control, but A, the Africans aren't going to like it. B, the Africans are going to fight back. C, they'll fight back and lose. But then D, they'll just keep fighting back to eventually, after World War II, they will kick the Europeans out. There will be decolonization. Okay? So let's talk about the African resistance. Okay? Now, a lot of the African resistance happened in what we call the Upper Nile Valley. And really that's two things. I mean, it's Egypt and it's the Sudan. So let's talk about Egypt first. Very, very important with Egypt. Okay? I mean, Egypt has always been an important area, but they're going to build something. When I say they, I mean the Europeans. They're going to build something in 1869 that is going to be instrumental in trade and connecting areas. 1869, the Europeans build the Suez Canal. Now, of course, us being Americans, when we think of important canals, we probably default to the Panama Canal, which is very important, don't get me wrong. Suez Canal just as important. It links the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. So now you can take a boat ride of cargo, whatever it is, and you don't have to go all the way under the Horn of Africa. You can just take that straight shot through from Europe to Europe's colonies in Asia. Whether it's India, whether it's Indonesia, whether it's China. You have that straight shot and it saves a lot of time. Okay? Now, originally there was a lot of shared interest in this canal. You had the British, you had the French, you had the Egyptians. And they're all kind of sharing, or let me rephrase it, controlling the canal. Eventually it's going to default to just the British controlling it, and let's talk about how this happens, okay? The leader of Egypt, he's known as the Khedive. And of course we talked about this before, going back to Muhammad Ali. These guys are trying to industrialize, they're trying to modernize in order to build up a stronger army. Now look, Muhammad Ali was trying to do it through the growing of raw cotton to trade to the British, to help him build up his army. They're also going to use profits from the Suez Canal to help build up their army. Well, this is going to come crashing down in the early 1870s. And really, it has to do with events that are going on across the world. 1865. For Americans, this is an important year. It's the year the Civil War ends. Well, when the Civil War ends, the South, the southern states in the United States, they start going back to planting cotton. Now, it's going to take a couple of years to get their cotton production up, but eventually that's going to happen. Now, when cotton production in the South goes up, you're increasing supply, which decreases demand, which decreases price. This hurts Egypt. Before, Egypt was getting X for its cotton, now it's getting 0.5X. They're getting less money. They start to go into an economic recession and economic depression in the 1870s. So, because of this, they are forced to sell their shares of the Suez Canal. So now, really, it's the British that are controlling it. Even though the Suez Canal is right next door to Egypt, okay, the Egyptians really don't have control over this anymore. But look, this causes a lot of resentment. And not only that, the Khedive is not the most popular person in the world anyway. So, in response, a couple years later, in 1882, there is a nationalist uprising in Egypt. The people are coming together and saying, the Khedive is not looking out for our best interest. He's a horrible person. And look, we've seen this in parts of Europe. Nationalism, right? People are rising up. They want their own representation. The Khedive knows he's in trouble, all right, because he's like, uh-oh, these guys don't like me, all right? I need to hold on to power, and I can't really do it by myself. Maybe the British will help me. And here's the deal. The British, they're willing to help. They're like, sure, Governor, I'll help you, all right? I don't know what voice that was, all right? Yeah, I'll help you. However, it's going to come at a cost. The English are more than willing to help the Khedive, and they do. They help the Khedive put down this nationalist revolt. But in return, the British want political power over Egypt. They don't necessarily want to rule Egypt because that's hard. All right? But they say, look, you're the Khedive, man. You're right here. Everybody else is below you, except one dude. We're going to put a British governor general right here. So, you can make your decisions, and you can run Egypt how you see fit as long as the governor general agrees with them. Okay? If that governor general who's up here says, no, I don't like that, you're not going to do it. You don't have total control. And look, it only makes sense for the British to do this because they have a huge investment in the Suez Canal right next door. They can't have political and social chaos going on right next to them. So really, from this point, in all intents and purposes, okay, we're going to see that Britain is controlling Egypt, not the Egyptians. Okay? Now, also in the Upper Nile Valley, you're going to have a place called the Sudan. Sudan's going to be a little bit more interesting, okay? So, there is a stronger threat in the Sudan than there was in Egypt. And that threat is going to be led by a man named Muhammad Ahmad. Okay? Now, Muhammad Ahmad, he's a cleric, he's a teacher, he's a religious leader, okay? But he also claims to be the Mahdi. Now, I don't want to downplay this because this is kind of a big deal. The Mahdi is to Muslims what the Messiah is to Christians and Jews. It's this savior that is going to come along and help guide good people on Judgment Day. Good people will defeat the bad people. Now look, that's all a matter of perspective. It's all a matter of point of view, because typically if I'm the good person, you're the bad person. Now if you're the good person, I'm probably the bad person. It's all a matter of point of view. Of course, when Ahmad, he's saying, I am the Mahdi, I will lead you against evil and corruption in the world, he's looking straight at the Egyptians. He's like, look, the Egyptians, the Khedive, they are corrupt. They are bad people. They need to be taken down. And they will launch jihads against the Egyptians. Now, of course, don't be stupid. This is not going to be in a vacuum. It's not going to be the people of Sudan launching jihads against the Egyptians, because the Egyptians don't have full control over Egypt. That's Britain. So when you're launching jihads against the Egyptians, you're going to inevitably bring in the British. Okay? And that's what happens. So let's talk about, the fight here. In 1884, Ahmad, okay, he is going to capture the city of Khartoum. And this is a big, big city in Egypt. He goes and kills the British commander. All right? And basically, he's saying, I am controlling this. Now, look, FYI, the British will reassert power, but they don't actually kill Ahmad. Ahmad dies of typhus, okay, which is a big communicable disease. Typically, you find it a lot in wars, okay? So he eventually dies, okay? And when he dies, that modest revolt really dies with him. But that doesn't mean the sentiment went away. We're going to see in the 1890s, the modest revolt will revive itself once again, okay? And really, the new Mahdi, he is going to lead his forces against the British at the Battle of Omdurman. Now, this is going to get bloody, all right? This is probably the bloodiest war between Africans and Europeans in the late 19th century in Africa, okay? Now, of course, look, the Mahdi brings a huge army here, okay? He's coming in, he's like, we are going to kill the infidels. We are going to kill the British. And the British are greatly outnumbered. The problem is the British have something called the Maxim gun, okay? And the Maxim gun is essentially the first belt-fed machine gun, okay? So it gets very bloody and this is actually a precursor to World War I. It gets very bloody for the Egyptians here. About 10,000 modest soldiers die, okay? And a lot of them are wounded. And really, from this point, the British still continued control. We'll talk about other places in a second.